Awesome. So I see that we are now live. And just want to make sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, or morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. We'll give everyone just a couple of seconds to trickle in. I just want to make sure that we have everyone in here and you can see my screen. And so today we will be covering kickstarting your UX writing career. And so if that's what you signed up for, you are in the right place. We are excited to see over 400 people registered, which is great. We received 75 plus questions and people tuning in from 50 plus countries. So if you could drop a chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. And right now the chat is blowing up. So we got Washington, D.C., Canada, Berlin, Maine, Atlanta, Egypt. I can't keep up. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your day with us.
Or your hour.
Yeah, or the hour. And so I am moderating today's Q&A from Austin, Texas. And then we have Bobbie in California and Patrick in Australia. And so we will get everything going. And so just so everyone is aware, we will be recording this session so you can watch it later, share it with a friend. And we want to make sure that we capture all of your questions. And so I know the chat can get kind of noisy. So if you want to put anything in the Q&A function, we'll make sure to moderate those, and then we'll also download them so that later we can cover off on any of your questions. We will publish this video on YouTube after, so again, you can watch it, and we will be sharing an email recap. So feel free to pay attention, take notes, whatever works for you. Awesome. So today we are joined by Bobbie and Patrick, the founders of UX Writers Collective. And so they are going to be answering all of your burning career questions. And we received a ton. So obviously, if we don't get to all of them, we will make sure we address them at a later date. So Bobbie is the former head of UX content strategy for Google Payments and Google Assistant, and a former design and content senior manager for QuickBooks. And then we have Patrick, a former lead digital copywriter for MYOB and host of Writers of Silicon Valley podcast and co-founder of UX Writers Collective as well. So we will keep going. So before we dive in, I just wanted to give everyone just a quick course overview. For those of you who are interested in getting certified and pursuing UX writing as a full-time career. And so UX writing fundamentals is what we consider our core certification. And so this is perfect for people who are looking for that strong foundation to really give them the confidence and the certification to make UX writing your full-time career. And then we're really excited about a new course coming soon for technical writers who want to hone in on UX writing and get those best practices for their work as well. So keep your eyes peeled for a new course, UX writing for tech writers. And then the remainder of our courses are skills-based courses. So we have content research and testing, chatbot writing and design, CX writing for marketing, as well as our microcopy course, which is an introduction to microcopy. Great. So like I mentioned, you guys all had amazing questions. We just want to make sure we can address all of them. And so today we will be focusing on these four main areas, which are skills, qualifications, the job search, portfolio 101, and career development. So if we don't get to your question today, we will make sure we address it in a follow-up webinar or a blog post. So just know that we really value all of your questions. And with that, we will start with the first category. So skills and qualifications. What skills should UX writers have to begin with? And this first one, I believe, Bobbie, you will kick us off.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy you're all here. This is so fun. Okay, so what skills should UX writers have? We have hard skills. You need to be a good writer. You've got to know your spelling, mechanics, and grammar for whatever language you are writing in. Our courses are offered in English. We're going to launch a few in Spanish in the next year, but we'll see when that happens. So if you're writing in English, in Spanish, in French, whatever your language is, man, you better have those writing skills solidly handled, spelling, mechanics, and grammar. You need to be highly efficient at communication. So in other words, you need to know how to shorten things to make them easier to understand, briefer, succinct, concise. One of the things you'll hear UX writers say is that you don't want to make things so short that they no longer make sense. So you're going to want to be familiar with that balance between concision and context. So make sure you never sacrifice context for brevity. Make sure everything makes sense to your users. You want to have curiosity and empathy for people. And maybe that should have gone under soft skills now that I'm looking at it. But one of the prerequisites for UX writing is you need to have a lot of compassion and empathy for your users as they're trying to get through a task. You really do want to know how they're feeling and meet them there, help them to get to the next task, help them complete steps. You're really trying to predict all the time what they're trying to get done and how you can help them at every little step. Another good skill is user experience design for some very specific elements of software, and that would be task instructions, dialogues, error messages, customer-facing emails. Those could be marketing or transactional emails. You'll want to know how to write for forms. So you'll want to know what's the difference between a form label and hint text that goes inside of a field. And then what about an error that also goes along with that form? So for forms, there's some complicated writing in there. It all looks simple, hopefully, when you're a user, but it takes a lot of work to get those things right. You'll also need to know how to write a tooltip. It's got to be short and it's got to be informative. When do you add a tooltip and when don't you? So those are kind of, skills of their own. How to write a notification. Notifications should always be short and front loaded so that if you're only seeing the first 5 words on your mobile device, those 5 words have meaning. So you'll know whether to click through or not. And you'll need to know how to write for onboarding flows. So tour screens and welcome to our software. Here are a bunch of empty states. And you'll have to be able to guide users on how to get those empty states filled. On the soft skills side, a UX writer is very much a chameleon. You're going to go out and work with lots of people from across the company. Those will be product managers, developers, designers, marketers, support people. So even though a lot of writers are very introverted, that's okay. But you want to be brave enough to go out and make connections with all these other people and make sure you pull in all of their good advice for you about what you're writing, and that you're going to be able to take in what they've offered you as feedback, synthesize it, and make a decision about what's right to include in your text and what to let go. An important soft skill is also you need to be able to persuade others, to have empathy, and to build connection. Some people approach UX writing with a very just sort of follow the rules, get it done, get them through the flows, and there's sort of a lack of empathy or relationship building. So one of the biggest things that user experience writers do is they're going to build connections and show a lot of empathy for our users and be able to persuade other people on your design team and on your development team that that's important. That's the quick answer.
Yeah, no, great. Patrick, do you have anything you want to add, or do you think that kind of covers off?
I think that's all great. I do apologize. My internet cut out for about 30 seconds. So, Bobbie, if you addressed what I'm about to say, I'm sorry, but I'll just repeat it. I think another great skill to have alongside all of these great ones is the ability to harness data and the ability to understand data in order to support an argument. I've seen a lot of UX writers argue for, or maybe not argue, but try and persuade a team to make a particular change or in a string, but they don't necessarily have the data backing up that decision. So the ability to use all different types of data and information in order to make their point, and then later on prove the results of their work as well.
Yeah, no, that's super, super important. Right, let's make sure I can move along. Great. So when hiring, what kind of background or experience do managers look for?
And this one is me again, so I'll hop right in. When I was a hiring manager at Google, Intuit, startups, what I needed to know about candidates was what was their passion? Why were they interested in the role? How could their passion help to support their learning and their drive to do really good work? So it's just important that you are able to express that in interviews, in your portfolio. Then I'd want to know, do you know the basic rules and best practices? So we just went over a little list of like how to write for all those UI components. You will need to know how to write an error message, or what's the best way to put one line of instruction below a heading in a UI, in a mobile screen, for example. I'd want to know that you're secure and knowledgeable enough to work independently. And what we mean by that is you can almost say that someone's level, when they come in and they're entry level, they'll need some hand holding. That's totally normal and good. As you move up to mid, less hand holding, you'll be able to go out to other teams and you'll be able to make those connections and get that work done without the help of your manager. And then eventually, when you're senior or a lead, you're doing the hand holding. So that's an important aspect for deciding what level you're at when you're applying for a role. Are you able to guide other team members to help them understand what's important about UX writing and maybe what to let go? So an example there might be that we occasionally break grammar rules. For example, we often use the pronoun they to refer to a single person because it's gender neutral. Every once in a while, you'll find somebody in your team or in your company who's very persnickety about grammar rules. Funny enough, I found that people who use the Queen's English are most fussy about these things. But you'll have to sort of be able to persuade people that they're, sometimes breaking the rules is all right.
Mm-hmm.
And then an important aspect is, do you learn quickly and can you flex when priorities change? And this is sort of the nature of all high-tech jobs. You've got to sort of be fast learning and fast moving, and those are just important aspects of the role.
Great. No, that's a great answer. Awesome. So we will move on to the next question if my cursor will cooperate. So do I need a certification? Will my portfolio be sufficient enough to land a job? And Patrick, this one is for you.
This one's for me. So the short answer is no, you don't need a certification in order to get a job. And yes, your portfolio can be enough. But a certification can definitely help. And the reason why a certification will help is that it will teach you the skills that Bobbie just described in the previous answer. So, for instance, a certification can help you reach a basic level of competency. So, learning how to write for various different components, different states, and so on. taking part in a certification will also add a project to your portfolio depending on what certification you do. So again, it's really important that when you apply for a job that you actually have material that you can show the hiring manager. And so taking part in a certification is not necessarily about the certification itself. It's about what you produce in that certification that you can show to a hiring manager. And again, going back to what Bobbie said before, a certification can help you learn knowledge in key areas. So what is the role of the UX writer in the design team? Not only that, but what is the role of everyone else in the design team and the company? Who are you going to encounter? For instance, you're working with the product manager. You need to understand their role. You need to understand what their needs are, what they expect from you, and also what you expect from them. You need to understand what is the developer's role in a design team? How does a UX writer and a developer work together? Will they ever work together? These are the types of things that a certification course can teach you if you're new to the field and you don't necessarily have that experience. But ultimately, your portfolio will be the deciding factor. And when you're taking part in the certification, the idea should be that you're creating something that you can add to your portfolio so that you can show a hiring manager, I've done this, I've shown this level of competency, and I'm able to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Bobbie, is there anything you might add to that?
Just a quick answer to a chat question. Yes, it's very beneficial if you've worked as a UX designer before, because any experience with UX is super valuable. Any experience with software design or software development is super valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to the other questions in just a minute here.
Yes. Awesome. Sorry, for some reason my mouse keeps getting frozen. Awesome. So what can we do outside of our jobs to stand out in the field to managers and recruiters?
Okay, so here's a wall of text for you guys, but I had a lot of suggestions here. Okay, so what's the point of standing out, right? Why do we want to stand out in the field? It's showing that you have a passion for the practice and the discipline, and that's important. Things you can do to show that you are an involved, active participant in learning UX writing are volunteering at conferences. So Confab, Button, UX design conferences. Try to find the ones that are most legitimate and have the, how do I say this, the most vetted panel of speakers. And that's sort of how you know, like a good conference from a not great conference, or something like that. You can start a UX writing meetup in your city, or you can attend your local meetup. So that's a good way to just sort of make connections with other people, get involved. You can write blog posts for UX Writers Collective. Yay, send us your proposals. We want to hear them. Send that to blog at UXWC, or excuse me, I'm sorry, blog at uxwriterscollective.com. You can also write for other prominent design outlets on Medium, for example. So there's UX Collective, which is very similar to our name, as just an example. Be sure that you know your interaction design and your visual design. So if I look at a UX writer's resume and I see that they have taken a course in visual design or interaction design, I'm going to say that person is very interested in participating in the design process and is proving that by studying up on the side with interaction design, UX design, or visual design. Other pluses are to learn design tools. The most prominent tools right now are Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD, Miro. Patrick, you probably can reel off a couple more. When you take the UX Writing Fundamentals course, and I hope you all will, Our final is a Figma project. So that's great because you'll learn how to handle text in Figma, and you'll get a real taste of what it's like to work on a design team on an actual software flow. You can always learn HTML and CSS. So those are kind of the basics for any kind of presentation in web apps or mobile apps, is to understand HTML and CSS. That will just give you a good solid foundation and background in almost any other tool. Yes, HTML and CSS are enough without JavaScript. You do not need to know JavaScript. That's a pretty arcane. Whoops. Katie, we just lost the, oh, there
Sorry,
we go.
we're back.
That's okay. Don't check your mail.
Oh no, for some reason the chat function keeps like going on to different browsers or different things.
Okay.
So I'm following along. Sorry, y'all.
Got you. The other tip I have for how to stand out is to specialize. So you can pick an area of UX writing that you think is extra valuable. So you can learn about accessibility, you can learn translation and localization, you can learn about info architecture, artificial intelligence and machine learning in relation to UX and software design, virtual reality, augmented reality, conversation design, or you might have a specialization in UX for hardware devices like talking cars, smartwatches, or even smart TVs. For information architecture, that really is about when you are developing a whole new app or website, how is the user going to navigate? So in other words, what are those top menu choices and what's most important to put there and what logically makes sense below each of those top choices? So that's a little very brief discussion of what information architecture means. UX writers are typically responsible for creating product voice and tone. The product voice and tone, generally, it ladders up to the brand voice and tone. So I'm trying to answer some quick chat questions.
Yeah,
here.
we've got a lot of great questions coming through.
Yep.
Awesome. So moving along, now we're going to focus on the job search. And we'll definitely cover more portfolio things in a few. So if there aren't a lot of entry-level openings, is it okay for a newbie to apply for jobs asking for 2+ years experience? Patrick, I think this is for you.
This is me. So the answer is yes. And in fact, it's okay to apply for any job. You know, there are no rules that say you can or can't apply for a specific job. But what you need to really be mindful of is you need to demonstrate that you have the competency in order to do the job. That's what the hiring manager really cares about. A lot of the time when a job ad says we want 2 years of experience or 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience, that's really just shorthand to try and find candidates who have a specific skill level. So if you're looking at a job ad and they say, we want someone with 2 years of experience, what you really need to do is read the rest of the job ad and find exactly what they're looking for, and then demonstrate that you can do those things. So for instance, you might see a job ad that says, we want a UX writer with 2 years of experience, and we really want someone who has written for error states. Perhaps that's the specific problem they're trying to fix. Well, then you would need to gear your portfolio and the work that you've done to show that you can do that. That's really what people are looking for. So when you see that job ad and you think, okay, well, I don't have enough experience, but they're asking for 2 years, you really need to demonstrate the skills and projects that show that experience, and then prove how you're able to do the job. And then just do a little mind experiment. Think about if you were in this position as a hiring manager and you're asking for someone with 2 years of experience, but someone who doesn't have that experience applies for the job. What questions would you ask? How would you maybe not interrogate that person, but what would you ask that person to make sure that they have the skills in order to do the job and then preemptively answer those in your application and in your portfolio. So the short answer is that yes, you can absolutely apply for that job if you don't necessarily have the experience or the formal experience, but you can still do a lot of things to make you stand out for that role.
Yeah, great. Bobbie, is there anything else you want to add or any questions in the chat that feel relevant to this topic? I'm just trying to take a quick scan.
I think the next couple slides will address some of the stuff that's coming up. So we'll just,
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what is the average annual salary for an entry-level UX writer compared to an experienced UX writer?
So this is me. So a couple of years ago, we conducted a salary survey at the UX Writers Collective, and we asked for a whole bunch of responses. And in fact, you can read the full results of that survey on our website. So we encourage you to check that out on our blog for some more information. But according to the salary survey, in the United States primarily, and so I'm going to adjust my answer to the United States because that's where we recorded the most number of responses. The average is $126,000. Now, when it comes to experience, for about 1 to 3 years of experience, men and women were $90,000 and $94,000 respectively. Now, for people who have over 10 years of experience, for men was $191,000 and women $143,000. That's quite a discrepancy there. So I'd really encourage you to use that information as much as possible. I would caveat that the number of, when we conducted this survey, it is a relatively small sample size, so it's important to just have that information at hand. But this is just a good starting point to understand, okay, what's possible and what is the difference between those two levels of experience. Bobbie, you might want to add something here because as you would know, in California especially, there are various different ways that a salary or total compensation can be packaged together. So you may have something to add.
Yeah, so one of the things to bear in mind is that when you're working for software companies, you'll often have a range of pay types that make up your total compensation. So there's your salary, there's your bonus that you might be eligible for, there's the sum total of your benefits, like your health and life insurance benefits, dental, vision insurance, and then there's also equity. So you might get stock. The one thing that I would say is that we didn't clarify when we asked this question which one of those we meant, and so some people may have answered with respect to their total compensation, and some may have answered based on a salary. So there's a little bit of squishiness in here. I would say that if you are a woman, and I would bet you about 70% of you are women in this in this field, please bear in mind that women are less comfortable asking for manager and leadership roles, often because we're juggling family needs, et cetera, and I'm talking from experience. So I would encourage all women, and I really mean this, to go for those leadership roles and to understand that your style of managing is just as interesting and compelling and valuable and cool as any man's would be. So just get in there and raise your hand for those leadership roles.
Let's do it, ladies.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so now we're going to segue into portfolio, which I know we have a ton of questions kind of trickling in on that as well. So we'll get started with this one. So what are the key components of a great portfolio? Should you go in depth, maybe on one sort of case study, or show a variety of examples?
Oh, I think this is me.
Yeah, Bobbie, you want to pick us up?
Thank you. Yeah. So a lot of these questions we've already covered. In fact, I don't know that this is I don't know that I put the right answer in here for this question. Your examples should show that you have covered the needs of the UX writing role. So Patrick mentioned, go look at that job description, break it down. What do they need in that role? And is your portfolio showing specifically that you can do that work?
Mhm.
So I mentioned before that a portfolio should express your passion and your interest in the role. It should tell us, like, why are you here? Why are you sitting in this room with me or on a Zoom call with me? Why are you interviewing for this job? What drives you? And you may have come from an adjacent role. So you may have come from a role where you're doing work that's similar, or you're writing, but you're not a UX writer, or you're not on a design team. And that is perfectly okay. What you'll want to do is pull from that work to find as many examples as you can of customer facing writing that lands in the UX writing landscape, if that makes sense. So if you've ever written error messages, they're totally relevant, put them in your portfolio. If you've written emails where you need to persuade or inform, put them in your portfolio. So that's kind of my advice there. I think I covered that one. Patrick, you might want to jump in.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I received about writing a portfolio is that you may or may not be familiar with the double diamond UX process, and I would encourage you to Google it and check it out. It's basically describing the process that a user experience project should go through. It's very helpful to write a case study that follows that same structure, which is you start at trying to research the problem and research, what's going on. Then you come to a point where you really define the problem. So what is it that you're trying to solve? Then you go into the next part, which is ideating, coming up with various different solutions, and then prototyping and testing, and then finally results. So you really check out the double diamond process, and it's just a great way to keep your case study really structured, because I know that if you don't have a structure to your case study, you can be like, oh, and we did this, oh, and we did that, and we did this too, and this was really cool, and it can be a little bit unstructured. Whereas I can tell you, when I've read portfolios as a hiring manager before, I really want to see, like, what was it that you were trying to accomplish? What solutions did you try? And also, Bobbie, I think you'll probably agree with this. What did you get wrong? Like, did you try something and it didn't work? And what did you learn from that? And then how did you implement that learning into your final result? A case study in a portfolio is really about demonstrating, how do you think, how do you respond to failure or unexpected results? How are you resilient enough to then take that information, implement it into your solution, and then keep going forward?
We had a question too, an add-on. Are PDF portfolios okay, or is a website the best way to do it? As a hiring manager in the past, I will tell you that I am biased towards people who put their portfolios online. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that if I know you've put your portfolio online, it tells me a lot. It tells me you're not afraid of doing that work to figure out a design tool. You're not afraid of trying to use a tool like Wix or Squarespace. If you can figure out that software, it means you can write for the software that I need you to write for. PDF portfolios are okay and even preferred in certain situations. So if your online portfolio is a general portfolio that addresses your UX writing skills, but you're applying for a job that has very specific requests to find out about your writing, you may need to add a PDF component with specific examples that company has requested. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be a little bit flexible on your portfolio and making sure that you're covering all the bases that company needs to see. So that can be a challenge, but yeah.
Bobbie, we've got a question here that I find really interesting, which is if you have relevant work, but that's under an NDA, how do you go about putting that in your portfolio and showing a prospective employer? This is from Natalie.
Yeah, ow, the pain of that. The pain, it hurts. I have to tell you guys, I left Google, and when you leave Google, you can take nothing with you. And it just was so painful because I had done such great stuff there with frameworks and tools and examples. So what do you do in that situation? Here's my advice. Number one, always stash away bits of your work and keep them in a private file so that even if you don't show those screens in your portfolio, you can at least speak to them in an interview and you'll remember the work that you did. Another piece of advice there is if you stash away your work and then later that work is public facing, any public facing work you are allowed to talk about. So even if you've signed an NDA, if you've worked on software or a site or a mobile app, and if that is released to the public, you can talk about that work. So just keep that in mind. Stash away those examples. You might be stashing for 2 years before it's time to go job hunting, but you'll have your file with all of your prompts and screen captures to help you.
Yeah, and Bobbie, one thing I might add to that just quickly is that you should really try and understand what is it that the NDA applies to, because it may be that your employer is only interested in making sure that the results, like specific results, are kept private, but they don't necessarily care if you want to show other aspects of the work. So talk to whoever's in charge at your company and just be really clear about what is it that they want to keep confidential and what is it that they're allowed to share. And you may find yourself in a situation where you're able to share more than you had thought. So yeah, just be really clear about what it is they're wanting.
You can also be a tiny bit backdoor about it. So you can say to your interviewer, this is proprietary work. I'm showing you once, please don't share, don't take screen captures, don't quote this. If you have to do that, you sort of can. It's an unofficial way that people approach that problem, but you didn't hear that from me.
Awesome. Well, we're going to carry along with some more portfolio questions. So how do you go about creating a portfolio if you don't have direct UX writing work experience, which I think we covered a little bit in the last section, but we'll definitely get into more tangibles here.
Okay, so if you've ever seen a terrible example of UI that's out in the world, Katie is awesome. She calls this in the wild.
Every day.
She's got some amazing examples in the Slack mentor channel for UX Writers Collective. So if you rewrite those examples and you put them in a portfolio, that is fair game. You just need to be able to articulate your rationale, talk about what you found bad about the example and how you improved it and what principles or best practices you relied on to guide you. So that would be how you would take a bad example, recreate it, and articulate why you made the changes that you did. If you take a course that offers a portfolio project, like we do, you're golden. That's a great example to put in your portfolio. If you have worked in an adjacent job, we talked about this a little bit. If you've written emails, if you've written CTAs, if you've written error messages, put it all in there. That's all related. You can do pro bono projects for friends, and you can also check volunteer nonprofit sites like catchafire.org, and you can volunteer to work for free for nonprofits. So win-win for everybody. You come out with examples and they come out with somebody having helped their nonprofit. So all good.
Yeah. And I'll add that I actually volunteer through Catch a Fire, and I found it to be a great resource. You can sign up for an hour project, a week project, whatever your time allows. So it's a really great way to give back, and then in exchange you get that work for your portfolio. We actually had a good question about, so let's say you do decide to find these microcopy moments in the wild and help rewrite them. Is it enough to just kind of include these quick bites, or should it be part of a larger story? Like, how do you frame that content that you're rewriting?
Yeah, I would say small examples are very valuable for the very reason that a lot of times entry-level writers are writing those teeny little microcopy instances, and they still need to be deeply understood from a user's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you are showing tiny examples, that's great. Talk about why it mattered. Talk about how it mattered to the rest of the flow around it, so that you do articulate the fact that you understand how that little piece plays into the overall flow of that user experience. That'll be important.
Great. So we also saw this in the chat. Let's say you don't have strong coding or design experience, or just learning. How can you kind of make your portfolio pop?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say about this question is that the most important part of your portfolio is showing your thinking. So you shouldn't necessarily think that you need to have some amazing looking portfolio, otherwise you're not going to stand out. I can say, as someone who's hired in the past, like, I don't care if a portfolio is just very basic, but if it has the right answers and the right material and is demonstrating that person knows what they're doing, that's going to be most important. That being said, it's always great to show off your skills and to make your portfolio look really awesome. So there are things that you could do. I would experiment with no-code sites like Squarespace or Wix. Both of those are fantastic, and also because they are component-based, they're really going to show off your content design abilities. So how are you laying out the content? How are you structuring it? We talked about information architecture a little bit before. That's a great way to demonstrate that type of skill. Now, that being said, you should know some aspects of visual and design work when you're creating a portfolio, and Squarespace or Wix make that really easy. So at a minimum, it needs to look good. It needs to be structured well. Really focus on things like color palettes, making it appear like a cohesive project. Make it look like you've put some intentional thought into how you're designing it. You don't want a bunch of different colors. You don't want different fonts. You don't want it to be you don't want it to look like you just sort of like slapped it together in 5 minutes. You want it to make it look like a whole. It doesn't need to be complex. It just everything needs to match. We talked about this before, but structure your case studies in compelling narratives. Use subheads to really break apart the different stages of your case studies. That just makes it really interesting to read, and also structured very well. And then finally, if you have images or sketches or anything that you've created during the design process, include that in the case study and in your portfolio, and use that to break up the information. If you have sketches that you've just done with pen and paper, take a photo of it, keep that, and then use that in your case study later on. It's just a really interesting way to see that you've done different types of work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the strength of those case studies that are really going to make you stand out. But those are some ways you can make it pop without necessarily going full boring Figma or Sketch.
Great.
Quick addition, Katie, if that's
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I just realized that one of the things we haven't addressed, a lot of people have a portfolio that serves more than one purpose. For example, you might be a playwright who is also a UX writer, or you might be a UX designer who also can specialize in UX writing, depending on the role. My advice is always just to make sure that your UX writing section of your portfolio is distinct and answers the questions that a UX writing hiring manager would have for you. So it's okay to have a portfolio that serves various purposes. If you're, oh, how do I say this politely? If you are a book author and your portfolio site looks like that's all you really are passionate about is writing your books, and you have a little adjunct part of your portfolio that is about UX writing, I would recommend that you do a separate portfolio that showcases your UX writing. So hiring managers will look to make sure that you're not just, trying to scrape up some paychecks when your passion is actually entirely outside of UX writing or software design.
Great. Yeah, I think one of the questions in the chat was asking if you have a strong design portfolio, should you separate UX writing into a separate portfolio, or should those kind of live together as well?
I think it's just fine if those live together because they're so closely related. Yeah, and I would just make sure that you communicate in your portfolio that you know how to handle UX writing specifically and not just visual design or interaction design.
Great. So moving on to career development, we've kind of talked about this in some of the other sections, but how can you market yourself if you've worked in adjacent roles, copywriting, journalism, or even other technical writing roles?
Okay, guys, listen up if this is you, because this is super, super, super important. A lot of people transition to UX writing from other fields, other types of writing. And I will tell you right now, almost nobody came into UX writing, 2 to 5 years ago with a UX writing background. It didn't exist. This is a new discipline. What I will say is this: do not apologize for your previous experience not being exactly perfect for what those hiring managers are looking for. Your skills are super, super valuable. If I'm interviewing a journalist, I know that that person knows how to target questions to developers to get the information they need so that their writing is good. I know that that journalist knows how to interview a designer and ask the right questions, or a product manager or another stakeholder. If you're a technical writer, it means that you understand the basic needs of users and you can apply those to a new format. Basically, you're taking your tech writing skills and you're applying them to software interfaces. That's completely valuable. So I would encourage you guys, don't feel bad like you don't have the right experience. Feel good and understand that your experience, your past work, whether you were a teacher or, a scientist, a researcher, whatever you were, bring those skills and proudly offer them up in this new role because they're valuable. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. I would also recommend that you emphasize your capabilities over your experience or your title. So you can rewrite your whole resume. If you were a marketing copywriter, that's great. What work did you do in your marketing writing that is very similar or falls into the wheelhouse for UX writing, and emphasize that in your resume and in your portfolio. In your past positions, talk about the impact and the success that you were able to achieve with your writing. And it doesn't matter what type of writing that was. If you were a support writer and you helped to reduce tickets because you understood what users needed to know in a support or troubleshooting environment, that means you were a great UX writer. You improved the user experience for those users. So just make sure that you're able to speak to your impact and the success of your work, whatever it was. And if you were involved in any role where you needed to be aware of and take into consideration usability and user-centered writing, that's extremely valuable. So just make sure that you're able to speak to those skills.
Great. And somebody asked, would social media management, could that be considered UX writing experience? And I think as a social media manager, in a way, right, you're crafting these experiences, whether it's one-to-one communication with people on social, you're writing copy with character restraints. But just curious your thoughts on how that translates to UX writer role.
Well, I love that answer, Katie. That was actually perfect. So Katie is a social media manager who's now working with us, and man, is she an excellent UX writer. Like, she jammed through our final for fundamentals and just scored, massively high scores because she's creative. She understands what users need in the moment. So yeah, just know that you already know what you're doing. Don't apologize for your awesomeness.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yes, love that answer. Awesome. And I just wanted to make a note, for some reason, the Q&A function is not opening on my screen. So if you are dropping questions in the chat, great, because that's where I can see them. So sorry about that. And we definitely want to get through these last few questions. We have about 10 minutes. So this one is it worth taking a role tangentially, but not directly related to the role you really want to get your foot in the door? What do we think?
Yeah, so here's what I would say about that. If your manager for the company that you're considering is supportive of UX writing or content design, in other words, if you already know there's a team somewhere or that role exists at that company, then yeah, go for it. Because maybe you work 6 months in an adjacent role, but then 6 months later you raise your hand and say, hey, I took a course, I'm certified. I know what I'm doing. Let me on your UX writing team, and they will. So that's awesome. Totally worth it. If that position offers you the chance to think about user experience writing, so customer facing writing, yay, Katie. Katie Glick says, that's what I did. Yay. So yeah, if you're doing customer facing work and it's somewhere related to user experience design and thinking, it's good. Also, yes, if you need paychecks, don't kill yourself with like, no, I won't accept any job that isn't the perfect job. Make sure you're, taking care of the basics. I don't need to tell you that, but I did anyway. And then if the role is too low paid or doesn't help you in developing that narrative that is your path to UX writing, then maybe it's not the best choice. So in other words, do you go to Fiverr and do you take on some $7 an hour marketing copywriting jobs? If it serves your narrative and it helps you because you just need some basic practice, okay. Don't put it on your resume. It's probably not going to impress anyone else, right? So these things are sort of look for the best experience you can get and look for that path forward. It might not be the perfect path, but it's going to get you there eventually, and just be patient.
Great.
Yeah, and Bobbie, I'll just add to that. If you do go into that position and you see that path, I'd add that you need to be proactive about that. You can't just wait for someone to sort of notice you and say like, oh, you're really good, you should come over here. You need to be proactively pursuing how you're going to transition into that next role.
Good stuff. So this question, I need a UX writing mentor. What's the best way to work with one?
Cool. So I think the first thing I should answer here is you need to be specific about like why you need a mentor. So what are you trying to achieve? Is it that you really want career guidance and advice? Is it that you want specific advice on how to improve your UX writing skills? What do you need? The reason I say that is because if you approach someone and you ask them to be a mentor, they're usually going to be a person with more experience. That means they're usually going to be busier. They're going to have a lot more responsibility. And so it's really going to help them if you are very specific about what you need. If you just go to them and say, hey, be my mentor, please. now you do all the work, and you put me through like a training program, or you rely on them to give you advice about anything under the sun. That's going to be more work for them. So you just need to be very specific about what it is that you're trying to understand. Then it's about finding a person who you think might be able to help you. And to that, I'd say it's really about networking. So you need to build relationships. And the way you can do that is through joining communities. So there are lots of UX writing communities on LinkedIn, the UX writing group that Bobbie manages. That's a great one. There's lots of people in there. The design community on Twitter, the hashtags UX writing, UX writers. There's lots of great discussions happening there. There are Slack groups like the UXWC UX Mentors group. The Content and UX Slack channel is a great one. There's lots of communities everywhere, particularly meetups. There's a lot of meetups now. There's a big one in San Francisco, but there are lots of other UX writing and content design / strategy meetups in cities all over the world. So no matter where you are, try and find one. If you don't have one, maybe start one. And start gatherings that way, and see what type of people you can meet. And then it's really about, after you've started establishing relationships with people, just reaching out to those people and saying, hi, I'd really love, I really admire your work. I'd love to speak with you for 20 or 30 minutes. And again, this comes back to being specific about what you want. So after you've built that relationship, you can then say to that person, look, I'm really looking for a mentor to help me with insert whatever you're looking for help with. I'm really looking for a mentor to help me with my skills in getting projects across the line inside my organization. Or I really would love some mentorship and guidance with information architecture. Or, I'd really like I really want to go from like a senior to a lead. How did you do that? How do I go about doing that? That's how I would go about building that relationship, because again, the more specific you are, the better it's going to be.
No, that's great. And I will also add that I recently joined this new platform called Lunch Club. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it's kind of similar to like virtual networking. You get paired with a match each week. I'm not quite sure which countries it's available in, but just wanting to plug if anyone is interested in doing that. And we are also thinking through how do we scale mentorship within UX Writers Collective. So definitely more to come there for students. And so just want to make sure we only have a couple minutes left, and I believe we are done with our kind of scheduled questioning, but definitely want to make sure we can get any outstanding chats answered. What's the best way to describe the accomplishments of your writing experience on your resume if you're coming from a non-UX background? So more of a resume related question instead of portfolio. What do we think there?
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. Just make sure that you actually use the keywords that you see in the job description. So when you're putting together a resume to respond to a role, make sure that whatever words they're using to find you, you are using them in your resume to be found. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I see people asking for the links to the Slack groups and Lunch Club. I will make sure to send resources in our post-webinar recap. Just for some reason, I can't close this browser or else I'm gonna lose everyone. But I will make sure to send those out. And let's see if we have any other last minute questions. Is there anything you shouldn't say on your resume?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So, okay, so we covered a couple of things kind of informally. Don't apologize for adjacent work. Make sure that you're pulling the best of your past work and your past experience and putting that forward. When you are putting together a resume, feel free to go ahead and put UX writer as the title at the top, but boy, oh boy, you better be able to support that further down. So if you have been, what's the difference between a UX writer and a UX copywriter? If you are writing copy in a UX environment, that's UX writing work. So it doesn't really matter what the title is. Yeah, I think that's probably, I better quit talking this. We're out of time.
Yeah, we
Thank
have
you for coming, everyone.
one more minute. Yes, just wanted to say thank you, everyone. And we will make sure we download all of the questions in the chat. And then we have all of your questions you submitted ahead of time. So we just gotta weed through all those, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you in another webinar or on our blog. So thank you again. And we will send you a follow-up via email. So stay tuned there. Thanks, Bobbie. Thanks, Patrick.
Bye, everybody. Good
Bye.
luck out there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, before we leave, lastly, and most importantly, our
how's it?
promo code. Don't leave us yet.
2% off code.
If you're still watching and you're interested in getting certified, we do have 20% off our fundamentals course with code Kickstart20. So that will be good through the end of the month. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone.